Hello and good evening. This is Victoria for INM.tv. I am with Alan of Salisbury, who's done a lecture at Birkbeck College on the occult art of law, which will be available on INM.tv. So, Alan, welcome.
Thank you, Victoria.
I will let you start with the thread we had yesterday, the ideas.
Yeah. What I would like to do is just briefly go over the nature of the reality that we live in.
Okay.
Because a lot of the reality was sold by what I term as the malignant parasites. Some people would say a dark sorcerer, some people would say the Illuminati, whatever name you want to give them. Mm-hmm. I prefer to call them by what their actions are, and they are malignant parasites.
Yeah.
In that New Age religion, they talk about we create our own reality. Most of their propaganda contains truths, but woven into that are a load of convenient lies that make any truth limp and flaccid and no use for anything, really.
Or have you going around in circles?
Yeah, so let's just look at this, how we create our own reality. We have what's called a reflective action of consciousness, mm-hmm. which is our thought. And that mostly functions around the use of words and our comprehension of those words.
Mm, the spelling.
And the spelling, as you know. So that's a reflective action of consciousness is also governed by our ego as well. So we've got this aspect of ourselves that's really quite small. It's a reflective action of consciousness, i.e. a mirror. And it has this false self known as the ego that's ruling. Our pre-consciousness or our subconsciousness, which is a vast infinity of our experience, and it's logged every nanosecond since we took our first breath. Mm-hmm. And that is connected with who we really are. So this aspect of us creating our own reality has more to do with the subliminal, subconscious endorsement. And of course, that's what has been overkill since we took our first breaths, all the advertising, the television, all that stuff, all that subliminal stuff that we believe to be true.
Yeah.
Because as children, we don't doubt our parents. We're innocent, we're virtuous, and therefore why would we doubt what our parents say or the society we live in? Why would we doubt any of that? So we believe it, and it's that belief that is the main currency of creating that reality we live in. We are reality projectors, and that's, if you like, the film that's rolling through this projection that we're putting out there that creates the reality we live in. So, but belief, just because you believe something doesn't mean to say it's true. And the example I give of that is, I could say, I believe the earth is round. You know, I was brought up with that. I saw it at school. There's the ball. It's in the corner of the little globe. The NASA thing, the photos and all the other stuff. The moon is round, so why isn't the world round? And yet, logically, I know that every railway engineer that's ever been and made a long railway track that goes hundreds and hundreds of miles, not one of them have dropped the railway line 8 inches every mile, which is what they should do to take in the curvature of the earth. They don't do it. And neither is there, when you fly an aeroplane and you're using an artificial horizon, that doesn't automatically drop 8 inches every mile. You know, so that just keeps going straight. Yeah. So although I believe in something, that will create the reality, even though there's information that would challenge that. I still kind of believe it. I don't want to maybe go there. It's kind of like what I call the my husband's having an affair syndrome, but I don't want to know it because it'll be just too traumatic, the divorce for the children. So I'll just pretend it's not happening. Yeah. You know, so we'll carry on with that belief. We won't allow that to be challenged.
But I mean, you're at least open-minded to have looked into both sides before making a judgment. Or, you don't tend to have fixed judgments on things, which I think is most important.
Because if we create our own reality, for me, that animates the fabric of the universe is what I would term as love. That animates the fabric of the universe, whether it's a wave or a particle. That's the energy that is behind it all, that I certainly can't comprehend with my reflective action of consciousness, and my ego has a huge problem with that. So I'm not able to convey that in the limited, paradigm that I'm revealing now. Certainly not through words, but I can say that that's what I believe. And in order for that to be so, I think a band called Little Feat, the singer called Lowell George, wrote a song, and the song's title really sums that up. It's called "Love Is the Perfect Imperfection," and that means that if something is perfect, it then becomes stagnant. It can't. It's got nowhere else to go. It's so. Love has to be imperfect, so we can't have these fixed beliefs. There has to be this dynamic. There's this huge dynamic going on. And it's normally it's three-dimensional, and it's probably it's multi-dimensional, but so I'll just keep it into the three-dimensional thing for this. Yeah. And that three-dimensional reality is how all life is expressed on a cellular level, and that would be it's natural, benign, or it's malignant. That's all they can be. Those are the only three options available in this dimensional space-time reality. Yeah. What's natural? If you come to natural law is the first one, is that we are all equal. Remember, we're all animated by that. The energy that's animating the fabric of the universe is love. So that's the power of it, Yeah. And so on that level, we're all equal. All life is equal. Yeah. And people can say, well, maybe that can't be. How somebody who maybe is born blind be equal to somebody who's got sight? And well, they have different gifts and different ways of perceiving things, so makes them equal. Absolutely, yeah. And it's also equal for the blind person and the sighted person to face their death. We don't know how much time we've got, so it doesn't matter how rich you are or how poor you are. It's still. Death's not going to be discriminatory at all. It's it's time to go. It's time to go. That's it. Yeah. In that sense, we're all equal. Yeah. And the second natural law is to treat other people as you'd like to be treated yourself, for how they would like to be treated. And whatever they want to be seen as. Yeah. In other words, there's a lot of respect going on there, really. Yeah. And the third one is only take what you need and leave the rest. Yeah. So in a planet or a flat Earth, whichever one you want to believe in or create, that's holographic universe, whatever. Yeah, in a holographic universe, in the dream, the ultimate dream, then you only take what you need. There's an abundance for everybody, and as long as you just take what you need. Yeah. And you leave the rest, then there's plenty for everybody. That's the natural. Then if we skip the benign and we go to the malignant, we've got the complete opposite. We've got the first law of malignant reality is that nobody is equal. Yeah. There's a whole hierarchy there that looks down. And the second law is that you don't treat everybody as you like to be treated yourself. You treat them like slaves. Profane goyim. Yeah, profane goyim, which is cattle or corpses. Yeah. That's how that translates. So there are no rights at all. And obviously the third law, you take everything to make sure that nobody else gets it. Yeah. So you've got maximum control over people. Maximum exactly. Yeah. So we've got those two extremes of reality, and then in between, which is kind of where most people are. And that's where the struggle is, and that's where the dynamic is, because, of course, the malignant parasites, they are running things now. That's what programming people to move towards their end of the spectrum. Exactly. Because they can then control it more. Absolutely. If people are greedy and backstabbing, and they've got more. The whole thing. They cut things down to the lowest common denominator. Yeah. That it's profit, and sever yourself from attributes like empathy, compassion, care, love. All these things are basically, they get in the way. They can't be a malignant parasite if you have the capacity to love. Yeah, and that's why they break down their own children at such a young age to mind control, and also to harden them
to their way of thinking, so they're part of the pack, like part of the beehive. Yeah.
Well, they do that in a very it's a wicked way, but they do that through the use of paedophilia. You know, where you'll have
Key of Solomon, I think it's called as well, where they
so while there's still a child who's got that virtue and that trusting innocence, it's still also, you know, it's plastic. It can be shaped into whatever you need it to be shaped. I think it was the Jesuits that said, give me the child from 1 to 7 and I'll show you the man. Well, if you interfere with those children at that early age, you can shape them. After that, it's
you compartmentalize the brain, and you've always got one personality that is stuck in that time frame. So you've always got that child to manipulate and go back to.
It used to be called multiple personality disorder, and I can't think what it's called.
I actually met someone who had that when I was skiing, when I learnt to ski. And, you know, it was really odd. You know, one day he could ski perfectly, and the next he was at the top of the mountain freaking out, not remembering at all anything. And it was very odd. The complete different personalities coming out. And I've got a friend who I told you about. I better not mention, but he is one of the elite, and he definitely has multiple personality. And one day he wants to kill all humanity, and the next he's very prone saving the world and doing all these wonderful things. And it's peculiar. It's peculiar, the personalities that come out in him.
It's normally triggered by some form of trauma.
Well, he did admit that they learn mind control from early on.
And they're forced,
and acting.
Yeah, they're forced to witness stuff, or stuff is done to them, or they're forced to do things to other children, and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole ritual thing, and of course, they're surrounded by the adults, which they look up to, and there's nothing to counter that, so they think that this is normal. And then, of course, as the programming goes on, they go to their own elite, if you want, schools or education, where they're an aspect of there's us and there's them out there. So there's this separation from the rest of Homo sapiens or sapiens. I'm not using the word human beings, because that was a word that was concocted by the Roman cult because they were aware that they broke their own laws when they were causing a genocide in South America, I think in the late 14th century. And so they rebadged the natives as humans, which means monster, and therefore they couldn't really be held or had any charges against them. So they made them less than, in much the same way that the Allies, after the Second World War, and being signatories to the Geneva Convention, when all the German soldiers surrendered, rather than calling them prisoners of war, they called them enemy combatants. And that meant they could genocide probably in the region of 7 million of them. But that's kind of been airbrushed out of history. But that's the thing you get with legal, because legal isn't law. It's a faux form of law. It's the rules of a corporation which can be twisted and distorted and adjusted to suit whatever profit that corporation is pursuing at any particular time. So it's not fixed, whereas the natural law is fixed. It's kind of hardwired into us, along with lots of other things that are hardwired into us that we tend to lose on the way, just by virtue of being a product of a malignant, parasitic society. And again, society isn't an all-inclusive word. Society means the socially dominant members of a community. So society actually means the elite who are running things. You're not included in that society.
Elites.
And you don't have those rights. And of course the legislation, the law bit, this goes back to the probably before what I call the Roman death cult. That comes round by the king of the world bit, the unum sanctum, the registration scam or confidence trick that's pulled over, Homo sapiens really, and the human beings, because what they do is they educate the Homo sapiens to be monsters. We're educated to be monsters.
Yeah.
We're educated in
our television, our
the
video
whole thing.
Games, everything is programming to desensitize us to.
It's so huge, and that we're so wrapped up in it. Just to be able to be detached enough to look at that, and get some idea of the scale of it.
Yeah.
For most people, it's just too much.
And it's also the pumping of fear, the endless fear, so that no one communicates with each other. You know, occasionally someone will break the ice on a tube or on a bus or out socially and smile, and they're like, what are they smiling at me for? Especially now with mobile phones and no one looking up from their phone. It's just like zombies.
The way the death cult works, and the death cult is basically the talking dead, or the corpse oration, which is what's running things now. I mean, every corporation is registered like to the Crown Corporation, or it's a multinational corporation, and they're running things. Countries have now been changed from being nations to corporations, and they've lost their sovereign aspect, and those that used to be monarchs are now CEOs of corporations, or they become presidents of corporations. There are no, as far as I know, well, there's probably a few sovereign nations left, and even they're a bit wobbly in terms of the root of what originally founded that. You have to go back a long way, really, to find the common denominators, because, of course, history has just been rewritten so many times. For me, if you go back, and you just got so many lies and distortions and contradictions.
His story.
Forensic historians are traditionally persecuted. Robert John Langdon, he's had problems. Alan Wilson, Baron Brackett, anybody.
Did Zachariah Sitchin have problems?
I think he lots of people have problems. As soon as you start coming up with something that challenges the status quo. Nick Collestrol, he's a classic academic. The great thing about Nick is he's got integrity and he won't be bought off. I mean, and he's lost, really a guaranteed job for life and a nice pension and all the easy stuff. And that's, of course, what happens, because when you join the death cult, that's what you get. You sell your status becomes less than. I mean, and if we get back to the law thing, who you really are is you're made by the Creator in that likeness, and you are what you are. And that's the highest status that you've got, and you inherit all of that. And what they trick you into doing is, at birth, they get your parents to trick you in to becoming just some livestock. That's collateral for a corporation. So you're basically, for the mother, just basically for a few benefits, is selling her child's mind, their body, and their soul.
Yes, but most people have no clue that when they register that child's name, they're giving away their child.
No, they don't.
I mean,
it's a con, but then you don't expect the malignant parasites to be honest. And most people, they believe what they want to believe. And of course, when you look at how that scam is, when is a woman more vulnerable than after she's given birth? So
also you're immediately hit with, you could get £1,000 fine. You possibly could.
Fear.
So it's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of what would happen if we're not following the law, what they believe is the law.
Exactly.
And, how does this mean for schools, colleges, payments, blah, blah, blah.
And, of course, the registrar and the hospital, they get a nice commission as well. So they're really, every child that they registered, cha-ching, they get something. The death cult runs on the old ancient gods. It worships Mammon, it worships Moloch. And in order for the death cult to work, life has to be sacrificed. Whether it's in terms of labour, where you work all your life just to get a few or Mammon tokens back to sustain yourself, because remember, they've stolen everything. Or your life is sacrificed in a war, which is the biggest, most profitable thing out. And of course, the big fear for the malignant parasites is, and this goes back to some of the Sitchin stuff, so I'm not saying that I subscribe to this, but it kind of makes sense. When the Anunnaki, or whatever you want to call them, genetically modified and created the human beings, their workers and all the other stuff, one of the things that really pissed them off was that after a while they realized that what they created had a divine aspect, which they'd lost being fallen angels, so to speak.
Yeah.
And of course they had to hardwire and disconnect us from the whole, or that reality, in order for us to be slaves and work for them, which must have been quite difficult. So they had to introduce certain viral aspects. I think it's about 3 to 4% of mankind is basically psychopaths. In other words, they have no empathy, no compassion or anything.
But it really does seem to be that bloodline, which was, the Anunnaki did seem to be a warmongering, interbreeding, psychopathic. It's true that the Anunnaki, if we follow Sitchin's theories, we've been totally manipulated by these psychopathic beings, and then they interbred with humanity. And for those that don't know. And that is the psychopathic bloodline that really has controlled things.
Well, they're Anunnaki, call them Anunnaki or whatever they're malignant parasites.
Yeah.
Highly advanced, technically malignant parasites.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter how big they are, whether they're giants and all the rest of it. They are basically malignant parasites, and as such, they're kind of like cancer. They just consume.
They destroyed their own planet, and then they came to steal as much as they could off ours, and try and save their planet, but also just rape and pillage and control, and just cause as much destruction and they be as greedy as they possibly could.
Exactly. Terminal, raving, malignant parasites.
And that's pretty much the royal bloodlines we have today, elite bloodlines, which is totally expecting to be worshipped and adored and
the whole thing,
get whatever they want.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a form, it's insanity, of course.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
And what people don't seem to see is that all of the religions are worshipping worshipping Anu.
One way or another,
Yeah.
One way or another.
And the whole of the British Museum, I was astounded to find such a big section with images and statues to Marduk, and not a single one said it was Marduk. And yet, if you Google Marduk, all of those images come up.
Yeah.
It's like, who's controlling what here? Why is the whole of the British Museum hiding the identity? Because with profane goyim, they're not meant to know.
Mankind has had these malignant parasites, infecting it.
Yeah.
Globally, rapidly so in the last 200 years. But we have to go back a very long way.
Yeah.
So far back we're into kind of mythology. And it's very difficult to do that. And one of the researchers that I've recently kind of touched upon is that John Lloyd Langdon, I think his name is, with the Stonehenge Enigma.
Yeah.
Where he uses forensic skills to turn the and using reason and logic as well, just keeping it within that paradigm. In fact, at the beginning, as an introduction, he said, well, I could go into outer space and, like we've just talked about the Anunnaki thing and all the other stuff. I'm just going to keep it in here because I'll let the reader do that if they want to. But there's enough here. I'm just going to deal with the forensic facts that will stand up for themselves. And I'll do some speculation on that, but it seems logic. It still holds together.
It also gets the wider population to actually pay attention to what he's saying and then move on and do their own research.
It's not going to fall for that.
They're not going to lose
the spell that's cast called conspiracy theory, so people just look the other way. It would be great. Imagine somebody, there's some golden sovereigns on the floor, and they're just about to pick them up, and somebody goes, conspiracy theory, that's just a conspiracy. Oh, right, and they look the other way. Because that's what happens in terms of knowledge. Yeah. When somebody comes out with some knowledge that has some value, then the malignant parasites or the people working for them, who are the CIA, as you know, came up with that term, conspiracy theory. They come up with these little magic, little charms, if you like.
Dismiss. Yeah.
And they say, that's a conspiracy theory. And the ego says, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I'll look the other way. And they'll just ignore that stuff and not even check it out. But that's the nature of people who are living in that benign thing. I mean, they...
Well, also, it's peer pressure. The people want to sort of be that. People have been just brought up to be sheep. And
Absolutely,
so they don't want to be stepping outside the box because it's shining a bright light on them. They prefer to sort of go off maybe and research in private if they're going to research at all. But then they get caught up with life, which has been manipulated so that you really go home, you watch TV because you're so exhausted with all the paperwork and form filling and bureaucracy and system crap. You don't have time for it. You just, I just need to switch off and have my beer, thank you very much, and watch my stupid balls moving back and forth across the screen.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
ball games.
Yeah. And what you said yesterday, which I think we must touch upon, is as people's view of taxes and the benefit system, and where people are, that you're taking my tax money. And I thought we had a very interesting conversation there. Yeah,
well, legally speaking, in terms of those that have taken the trouble to research the system, that through birth registration in that Roman system, when a contract is made, there has to be an exchange. And what we get in exchange is a trust.
Yeah.
So when you register birth, a trust is created. In fact, there's 3 trusts that are created, some people research, but I'll just stick it for the one.
Okay.
Since 1933, which was obviously where they were trying to recover from what the banksters created, which was the Wall Street crash, which is where the malignancy owns everything that's natural and dissolves the first world and all that were ruling it, and infiltrated, and their malignant parasitism reigned supreme through what was the aristocracy, and they failed us massively, or they were slaughtered on the battlefields of Verdun and Flanders and all the rest of it. So there's precious little left, and then that just finished the whole thing off. They came up with the and it's an old idea, and in Roman law, and it's a bonded slave. So they had a bonded slave, and of course a master is always responsible for his slave. So he has a bond which will cover any liabilities for that slave. And then this kind of evolved into a trust system. So you have a trust account that's worth, to some researchers, millions. And that's what covers the liability in your life. That's what also backs the currency that's in circulation, because what we have, as we're run by malignant parasites, the currency that we have is malignant.
Yeah.
It's malignant because it's not debt-free.
Yeah.
Because it has interest, that's the parasitic feeding off the life force. So basically, you're born with a life, which is the most valuable commodity that you've got. That is taken from you, and a trust is created.
Yeah.
And then you are educated, and you go to work 40 hours a week, if you're lucky, or whatever, 37 hours a week. And that's more of your life taken from you.
Yeah.
And in exchange from that, you kind of have varying degrees in a hierarchical system of what they would term as luxury. So you can be living on subsistence, and they create this class. In fact, it's changed now because the class thing's gone. It's more the haves and the have-nots.
Because they've tried to remove the middle class. So much. Yeah.
That's gone because certainly the English middle class, there was a certain awareness of playing the game and what was right and compassion and all that kind of stuff. But what we have now is just materialism.
Yeah.
There is no class to that.
Because they've realised that they're trying to that they have been destroying the middle class.
Yeah.
They're either moving to the greedy side of things, or they've been pushed back to the poverty side of things. So
it's devolution in so many ways of the human beings, the monsters, and the Homo sapiens. Those that want to get back to a natural thing. In other words, they have this feeling that what's going on around them is completely unnatural and insane and crazy. And of course they're right, but they have to sit on that to just go along with what they know.
That's why some of my family are supporting the elite in their minds, because they have the fear of going to the other end of the spectrum of poverty. So therefore they think that if they say supportive things about the royal family and supportive things about the system as the status quo, that they are somehow going to be supported by that, where they don't give a shit. You know, unless you're part of the elite bloodline, you are profane goyim. Well, and no amount of supporting them is going to do you any good. And this is where so many people...
There was something I saw the other day. It was a guy, I can't remember what the link is. It was a shame, really, because it's worth people watching. But his take on it was really good. People are Satanists, but they don't even realise it. Their whole life, what they're actually doing, the rituals that they're involved in, but they just don't think that that's what they're doing.
Well, I'm sure half of these musicians that do all the, 666 and the hand over the eye and the Illuminati pyramid, they have no clue. They're all just mind-controlled twats that are being told to do this by choreographers or their manager.
They're paid off, and they get the money, the glory, the fame, and all the other stuff. But after a while, they click. They click, but of course by then it's too late. They've sold their souls and all the other stuff, and they've been probably part of some rituals and stuff, and that's it. They're not going to be let go.
Do you want to stay eating caviar, or would you like to be on poverty row again? They're going to...
Because poverty is the worst violence you can inflict on anyone. It really is. When the malignant parasites own everything, there is nowhere to go. Then poverty is the worst thing that's available.
But getting back to the benefit thing, because I moved you away from that a little bit, so let's finish that.
Well, so this trust fund is there. It's worth millions, and that's what your benefit comes from. It doesn't come from national insurance. It doesn't come from tax paying or anything like that. Because basically the root of the authority of law is just two roots. The first is it's been ordained by the Creator, i.e. God, which of course is shifted on other malignant parasites. That means Satan, Baphomet, whatever you want to call that pantheon of... I mean, you can take your pick, but they're not nice guys. And they demand blood, life, sacrifices in one way or another, whether it's in a war or something. And
the jealous, vengeful God, which has nothing to do with prime source creator.
There's a huge clue there. I mean, anybody...
It was a huge clue to me as a child. I can't believe that people were bought.
Why would God be jealous? You create everything. What, there's another God? Well, that can't be God then, can it? It's got to be something that's lesser. Something.
And it's written, apparently, Zachariah said, it's written that the Anunnaki did know there was another God. The prime source creator that they... So, it's a big clue that these people or beings or whatever they are not gods. They were just posing as gods.
What I tend to think that they are is they fall into that dark sorcerer thing. And when they're doing their dark magic as malignant parasites, they know how the universe works. So they have to deflect the karma away, because their whole system works on curses. And if you even get into the most basic magical systems, if you curse someone and that curse comes back to you, it comes back tenfold. That's the kind of law of the universe, which is why in their law or in their legal system, they have to get consent. Because if they get consent, then they can say, well, no, this human consented. It's not me. I gave them the choice. I offered them a contract and they said, and that's their sign of nature. That's their signature. So that was it. That's their sign of nature as a living being, created thing, not the person stuff. And they consented to be there. That's why they want the signature there. Is because they're now looking at you as being something much bigger than the person. They're looking at you as an intact being that's born with all your unalienable rights, and that you've chosen to give all those up, even though most people have got no idea what that is. And you've put your sign of nature, i.e. you're a living thing, And they want you to sign in black because black is the colour of blood when it's dead. They don't want you to sign in red. They find that very offensive because that's very powerful in their system to sign something in blood because that's living.
Yeah.
You know, and the other colour I believe is blue, which means you're into the Salic law or the maritime law of the sea, Salica, salt.
Yeah.
The law of the sea, and they do that in blue, you know.
Yeah, so that's why all the benefit forms are in black as well.
Yeah, they say black ink, sign this form in black ink and all that other stuff, because they are all legal documents, and they're all legal documents that the system needs in order to get access
to what's rightfully
from
yours.
Those that have power of attorney over you, because you don't have access to that account. So that they will then issue credit, which will eventually find its way to you after those corporations or called pirates have taken their administrative cuts.
Yeah.
So it kind of all works like the legal system. So that you haven't got a job, you can't work for yourself, you're ill, you fill out this form, you put your sign of nature to show that you're a living thing. So therefore that trust belongs to you, but you haven't got it. The reason you haven't got it is really convoluted, but I'll try and go into it, is because what should have happened is when your mother sold you as a bonded slave into a society, and there is good reasons why that's good, is that you could have reclaimed that at the age of 7.
Yeah, up to the age of 7.
Up to the age of 7, which is why some children were called master.
Yeah.
Because they're masters, they've still got that potential in them. But in their twisted, devious, sick minds, they kind of come out with this ridiculous, insane thing that you were lost at sea and therefore the government claimed that. Yeah. Because you didn't claim it. You had 7 years to claim it. Because you didn't claim it, then you're lost at sea, so the government now hold that bond. Yeah. Okay, so if they hold that bond and you make a claim for your benefits and you sign it, you'd think, well, that's proof that I'm alive. Why don't they give you the bond? Yeah. Well, the reason they don't give you that bond, they get out of it this way, is because you registered in a ward to vote. Yeah. So when you register in a ward, which is a council thing, you're basically registering saying, I'm a mental health outpatient. I can't manage my own affair. I need someone to have power of attorney over me. Yeah. So
and I can't sign my signature. I just put an X because I'm a complete
imbecile. You put an X in the box because you've lost you're an imbecile. Yeah. And so they take that as evidence. Yeah. That you can't manage your own affairs, so somebody else has to go to all the trouble of administrating your estate.
And that's what Ellen was saying about the ward, in a hospital, is when you no longer have parental rights.
You signed yourself in. Yeah. You signed yourself. Everybody that's in that ward.
So these poor people who can't get their son moved from that hospital.
Well, it's interesting that you say poor people because that derived from the poor laws. Because the whole election scam, and if you read Plato, which is worth doing occasionally, they were very surprised when the Romans turned up to see what democracy was. Yeah. Because the Greeks knew the Romans were just complete plagiarists, and they knew that they weren't really interested in a real democracy. What they wanted to do was learn about democracy to see how they could twist it and shape it to their own advantage, so they could create the illusion of democracy to manipulate people, but not actually give anything away. Yes. And that's played out again in 1848, I think it was, in Kennington Park, which used to be common land, and the first Chartist meeting that was there, where the workers were saying, we want to vote, because before then it was only aristocrats, members of the clergy, that could vote. So what happened is they were on the brink of a revolution. I remember the Peterloo massacre and all the other stuff. I mean, you've got the Industrial Revolution. When you set yourself in that time frame, you can imagine those that are clinging on to power, the malignant parasites, they're going, we need to come up with a way that makes it think, so they think we've given them something, when we actually haven't given them anything at all. Yeah. And we need to create that. This is how clever they are So we're getting something in return. So they said, okay, you can vote, but you have to register to vote.
Yeah.
So you register, and what they did is they tweaked the poor laws that if you were destitute and you couldn't look after yourself, you would go to the clergy. And remember, it's the church that's running things. Everything is ordained by the church. You would go to that parish and you'd say, I'm destitute, put me in the workhouse, all the other stuff, and they get you to sign, which meant that they had power of attorney over everything. So they just tweaked that a bit. So you registered to vote. Yeah. Now you're registering in a ward instead of a parish council. It's a council.
Yeah.
And your MPs have surgeries.
Yeah.
Just like you would in a hospital, because you're a mental health outpatient that has no rights.
Yeah. And
basically, the simplest way to look at it is if you've seen the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where you've got Jack Nicholson. Yeah. And he's going, look, we want to go out for a fishing trip.
Yeah. And
he's got to hassle Nurse Ratched. No slight against Theresa May, maybe. Or Theresa May, maybe, I don't know.
Yes.
But you're asking Nurse Ratched, which are the MPs, who will then ask the guys that own the hospital, is it okay you can go on a fishing trip? Yeah. And sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it isn't. But that's the Roman version of democracy, which isn't democracy at all. It's just a complete illusion.
Yeah.
And because you've registered to vote, you need to understand what this term register means. When you register anything, you are giving away whatever you're registering to whoever you're registering it with. So your car is registered. It's owned by the DVLA. Who owns the DVLA? The Crown Corporation. Yeah. The Crown isn't the Queen. It's
people get that certificate back saying you are now the registered keeper.
Yeah.
And yet they still don't clue in that they've given it away, and they don't understand the legal meaning behind it all.
Exactly. And the other reason is if you've got that bond, why do you need any insurance?
Yeah.
Because that bond should cover it all, shouldn't it? Because the police drive around without any insurance, but they're a corporation that has assets that will cover any accident. Which is why if you're involved in an accident with a police car, it'll be really difficult to make a claim because they don't want to pay out anything.
Yeah.
And again, all corporations don't have to be insured if they've got assets over, I don't know how many millions or whatever it is, that they can cover certain liabilities.
Yeah.
So, the police, if you say, if the police says, can I see your driving licence and your insurance, please? And say, when I see your insurance, mate, you show me your insurance, I'll show you mine. They can't.
Yeah.
A lot of people that do the research, the freemen and all that stuff, which I don't consider myself to be freeman. Freeman means baron. I don't want to be an aristocrat. I don't. I'm into that natural thing. We're all equal.
Yeah. And
all that stuff. And a lot of people go into it because they want to save money, make money, or not pay taxes, or do all this,
or claim their birth bond back.
Yeah. And all that stuff. Or some of them believe that the system is actually going to say, okay, You've sussed us now. Here's a magic little credit card.
Off you go.
You will now let you have access to this account. That's as ludicrous as going into Las Vegas and figuring out
Well, also, you've got an endless battle on your hands because most people aren't educated, so most policemen will just think, you're being an arsehole, I'll tase you.
Yeah, but just think,
or I'll throw you in jail and beat you up.
Yeah.
So it's just like an endless fight. So who wants an endless fight? We need to look at the ways we can change the system by coming up with solutions to get rid of the malignant parasites.
Well, these solutions have happened before. And this is where we go right the way back to the Plato thing, and we go back to the myth of Atlantis, and we read what he's written, and we back that up with some forensic stuff. And you can download this stuff from, I ought to get the name right, I think it's Robert John Langdon, that's his name. And if you go to his website, which is Stonehenge Enigma,
it's the-Stonehenge-Enigma.
My comprehension of what he's written, I've read most, I think I've read all of the free PDFs. I haven't I will go down. I want to go down to his bookshop actually and get some of the maps and all the rest of it. But it's his research I find is very interesting, and it opens up new ways of looking at things. And he's kind of cross-correlated a lot of things, certainly with what Plato's written. But the Atlanteans, or Cro-Magnon basically comes from, it's the name of a cave or an area in France where they found these huge skeletons of Homo sapiens that the average male height was about 7 foot and the female height was about 6'6", and their brain capacity was 15% more than ours, which when you consider we only use allegedly 12 to 13% of our brains anyway, that's quite a lot. So but he also looked at the forensic aspect of the Stonehenge and where the posts were built that they found in the car parks there. I can only go, I'd recommend everybody to read it, so I'm just skipping over the top. It was all underwater, and it was all underwater because that was where the groundwater level was, and that Stonehenge was on a peninsula. In other words, 3 sides it was surrounded by water. The water level, or groundwater level, was 65 metres higher than it is now, and that was due to the glacial melts that were going on at the time that made these huge torrents, these huge rivers that were actually falling into making the Atlantic rise and the North Sea rise. Well, in the North Sea, in Victorian times, they kind of trawled up lion bones, elephant bones, quite exotic animal bones as well, that you think, well, how does that get in the North Sea? Well, because at that time, and I think we're going back again, his dating is, he doesn't agree with the official dating, so we're going back 7,000 years really, maybe more, and a civilization that lived there known as the Atlanteans, who were basically boat people. They got things together on boats, and that certainly in this country and most of Europe, the megalithic monuments that they built were high. They weren't at low at the levels they are now. They were kind of 65 metres higher on that water level now, and a lot of the roadways, the ancient trackways, Offa's Dyke is another one, which is a canal, and they just travelled around as boat people, and their pursuit was that of virtue. They weren't really interested in property, and to all intents and purposes they were governed by those first 3 laws that I said, the natural laws. It took quite a long time for them to become corrupt, i.e. to get the cancer, and there was quite a few the malignant parasitism, so they kind of rotted out from the inside basically. And then there was, of course, as the legend would have it, the sea levels rose, so that was the end of Atlantis, and they all went off in different ways, founding different cultures, Egypt and Greece being 2 of them. And there is other evidence as well of monuments like Avebury Rings in Australia that was bulldozed down in the 1930s. They came up with money, only it wasn't like the death-based money that we have, the malignant money system that we have. It was based on contributionalism, which is the kind of thing that comes natural. In other words, you are as strong as the society you live in, and everybody contributes. And you don't really need to contribute that much.
Have you looked into Michael Tellinger's work?
Yes,
On contributions?
I checked that, and that came from the Zulu thing. And his the Ubuntu, wasn't it?
Credo Mutua.
Credo Mutua. Well, apparently him and Credo don't get on too well.
Well, they kind of had a rather silly falling out, and I don't know whether it was anything major really. It was over finances and. Again, over the malignant over Mammon.
money.
So
over the Mammon. It's the same one, you see. It's a black dark magic, but it's magic and it gets results. And there are now, I believe, it's only Iran, North Korea and Syria that isn't part of that horrendous malignant monetary system.
Yeah.
You know, and it needs to be seen that, you know, every society, every culture, every civilization, its lifeblood is trade.
Yeah.
And therefore the currency of that trade has to be clean and pure, and it has to be issued by those of very high virtue. One of the things that I've realized as I've researched is the places that you think, oh, if I go there, they're going to really hate me. Those are the places you really need to go. You know, if it's taboo, if the system is kind of created it as being taboo, then that's where you have to go. Which is why they've made it taboo, is to protect it, because there's a way out through that. And one of those, as you were saying about the banking system before, the Federal Reserve, and on all the rest of that, is the debt-free money system. And of course, the most recent manifestation of that was when in the Third Reich, which nobody really wants to go back to, and again it's got that taboo thing. Yeah. But of course the Third Reich, the first thing they issued when they came into power was laws that protected animals, laws that protected the environment, and they got rid of the malignant parasitic banking system, and they created interest-free money based on the contributionalism that each member of that society.
Now, changing the money system would have a knock-on effect on everything.
In less than 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, that economy, although it had to interact...
Because all things like the corrupt media just following the banksters' agenda, all of that would be forced to change. We'd all be free.
Well, that's run by the malignant parasites. It's you see, wherever money... This is the bit that people really need to get. Malignant or currency goes everywhere. Yeah. Whatever your business is, whether it's media, whether you're selling sweets in a sweet shop, it doesn't make any difference. It goes everywhere. And if it's malignant, it will infect it in a negative way, whichever way you look at it. So as soon as you clean that currency up, there's a knock-on effect. Yeah. Things start cleaning up. So when you've got debt-free money, you've then got a whole lot of wealth to deal with to solve problems. You can start solving problems, and people then feel like they're contributing something. Yeah. And you've also, being the government and the rest of it, having power of attorney over all those bonds and everything, you've got something to back that with. Yeah. Okay, whether you let the people know that or not, which was not the case in the Third Reich, because there were a lot of...
The thing is, how are we going to get that? I mean, we have to look at other options too, because the people like the Rothschilds, who have invaded every country that doesn't have a Rothschild central bank, we've got to also look at ways we can make the corporations accountable. So that
it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. So, firstly, I kind of shy against using... I mean, I know I've done, like you in the past, used the word Rothschild, so I'm sticking to the malignant parasites.
Yeah, well, there's a whole load of families. I shouldn't use the term Rothschild.
So, but
they are...
Basically, corporations, their legal structure means that they have an obligation. Their first obligation is to provide profits for the shareholders. Yeah. Okay. Now, over the last 200 years, and that's all that it's been really, legislation has been passed, acts that have been created to protect the identity of shareholders. Yeah. For example, by law, you cannot find out who the shareholders are to the Bank of England.
Yes, I found that with the Bank of Scotland. I was trying to... contact him for the Piccadilly Circus for putting a living wall up around that building.
Yeah, so you cannot
get in contact with
anyone. And you find corporations. You find corporations, and one of the most interesting books that I've read, although I haven't finished it because I got sidetracked on, was about, getting back to the Third Reich thing, Martin Bormann, who was Hitler's guy who sorted out all the corporations, and I mean he was the business brains behind the whole thing, and he's the least known one, but he was tutored and mentored by the malignant parasites. He worked out how they worked, and they still can't find out where he stashed part of the loot that the German Workers' National Socialist Party managed to steal off people and stash in banks and all the rest of it. So he used the same system they did. And if you try and find out, for example, you want to find out who got the majority shares of BT, you'll find it's another corporation or more corporations. And okay, well, who runs their shares? More corporations. So you'll never find out because they cover it. They cover their troubles of who really owns what. Because ultimately, who really owns what is responsible. They're responsible for it all. They are liable, which is why they have to kind of deflect
like the benefit system.
Exactly, the whole thing.
On behalf of the Department of Work and Pensions. So like, well, who is working on behalf of the Department of Work and Pensions?
Well, again, the Department of Work and Pensions is a corporation that's hired by a corporation, the government, in order to assist in the administration of these bonded accounts. I mean, they probably, if you get £100 a week in a benefit, the Department of Work and Pensions have got to at least get £200 or £300 a week for administrating that.
Yeah.
And that's not on top of the other corporations like the French Atos to do their bits and pieces and all the rest of it. So they're all getting that money and you're not getting any of it. You know, because remember, it's there you are in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You've got your basic benefits. You don't have any rights. All these guys are running power of attorney over you. And they're running rings around you with their scams and devious ways. I mean, when you go to court, courtio actually means to deal in bonds and sureties. It's not like a courtyard or a place in a marketplace where they settle things. Yeah. Which is what they want you to believe. See, they lead you to believe that you're going to get a thing called justice with legislation.
No, it's just us.
Yeah, and it's basically like the Bar Association is a private association. So what's that doing in a public place, a court? And you swear a higher oath to the bar than you would your public oath. So the judges, although they swear an allegiance to the Queen and all the rest of it, they swear a higher oath, what they call a superior oath, and so that gives them the right to lie, because they're obliged to honour this superior oath. So it's all hidden behind some of it's really childish. You know, it's like I told a lie, but my fingers were crossed behind my back, so it was okay. You know, I mean, it's pathetic, but you see, these people are addicted to the most powerful addictive substance that I know of, and that is money. Yeah. I mean, you get a bunch of people, I've done it, you put a table, you put every drug on there, and you say to people, would you like this, would you like that, you know, blah, 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 and say, okay, there's $5,000 in used notes. Oh, that'll be nice. It's the most addictive, and it's a psychological addiction. All those other substances have got to have some sort of chemical reaction to give you an effect of being high. Yeah. But this is totally mind programming, and that's the only religion there is. Yeah. Is the religion of money, and it's the satanic one. The others are just kind of there. You know, you may
to ease the fact that you haven't got that thing in the middle.
Yeah. You might. No, it isn't. It's there to sort of satiate a natural kind of desire, you know, to do good, you know. So you'll go maybe one day a week somewhere and confess your sins, and you're working some program, and it'll make you feel good because that's who you really are, and that's what you should really be doing. Yeah. But they've just kind of manipulated that as a kind of sideshow, these dark sources, and then they're feeding on that as well because they've corporatized it. But, you know, people should be pursuing virtue. Yeah. They should be honest, open-minded and willing. You know, they should care. They should have compassion. They should have empathy. All these things should be held really highly. you know, and the people who are true to themselves, they follow their path in life, whether it's whatever they do. I mean, people who want to be healers, artists, or engineers, and all this. I mean, there's a guy, and this is, I guess, maybe this is the problem. This highlights it probably more than ever. There was a guy called Stanley Myers who created a car with his brother that ran totally on water.
Yeah.
You know, now just think about the impact of that. You know, totally ran on water. No more oil, no more drilling, no more wars for oil, no more pipelines.
But hydrogen is different from... But this is a water car.
No, this is a car, you put water in it, and it's got these spark plugs that through various different systems of resonance actually get the hydrogen out of that water in that second, nanosecond, in order to ignite and do that. So you just put water in the car. There's no hydrogen battery or anything like that. Right. It's just water in the car. Just for
those who are unaware. I do know about Stanley Meyer. But
yeah. So he goes, and there are other guys.
Because my dad argued, oh no, it's totally different hydrogen than...
But the point is that there was a system that could change everything. In other words, the Homo sapiens have the intelligence to create a utopia for themselves.
Yeah.
In other words, there's limitless pollution-free energy out there.
Yeah.
Okay, nobody needs to freeze to death. And even the machines we've got now, these cranky old noisy internal combustion engines, can still be used until they're worn out and we come up with something better. What happened to Stanley Myers was that he was poisoned to death by a CIA agent and a guy from NASA. Yeah. And he said, I'm poisoned.
Yeah.
And they took all the details away and they sat on it. In other words, the first obstacle for all the Homo sapiens, those that are kind of wanting to go towards the natural thing or want to lose that monster thing, is they have to take out the malignant parasites. And in order to get rid of a parasite, you have to stop feeding it. You know,
but will enough of society stop?
That's the transition. That's the first thing before you can.
Yes, but I don't see how that's going to happen. People are so programmed into getting their next pair of Nikes, feeding the corporations. Even me myself, trying to wean myself off that Nescafe coffee, you know, from the evil CEO.
If you shift the corporations, their first priority of providing profits for anonymous shareholders, and if you change the legislation and say, no, you've got to provide a service first before you provide those profits, then that's changed something. So what you end up with then, if the global, you know, or in a country or in a nation, they say, right, all corporations, multinational corporations, they've got to go. You've got to be based in a country. That's got to go, the multinational thing. Second thing, you've got to provide a service that doesn't harm the environment, that people benefit from. And then when you do those two things, by sure, give profit to your shareholders, who we need to know. Well, that's not much jiggering of a law or legal system to get those things together, but that would change everything.
It would, but how do we get there? I mean, at the moment, the corruption levels seem to be going through the roof at the moment. I mean, everything is so dark. And they said they were getting rid of Atos, and now you've still got Atos, and you've got a bigger beast that is more satanic and more evil than anything that I've ever seen before. Well, I mean, they're demonizing.
Well, but that's the further it goes in that direction, the more obvious it becomes how wicked and evil it is. And so,
well, I think a lot more people are waking up because it's got so bad. But but are people changing?
Well, they are.
We've got more chemtrails than ever, more smart meters going in, more monitoring of people.
Yeah, but that means they are having to pull out all the stops.
Yeah.
Just to gorge themselves on what they're doing now. And
we do
know that they've their timetables had to be rejiggered because they're, so
they wanted to kill us all off and they failed miserably.
Yeah, so there's, more people are waking up. I mean, I think there is the potential for collective consciousness and more people to be able to connect to that.
Yeah.
And see this stuff, and talk about this stuff, and it's not bad to talk about this stuff. You're not going to be ridiculed for being a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. The first thing you need to do is stop buying a newspaper.
Yeah.
Stop watching the television.
I did that in the 80s.
Yeah, stop. Yeah, exactly. But you'd be surprised people that still buy. So it takes their media thing out. Go for alternative media, which of course is why Theresa May of the Terrorori Party want to pass legislation so they want to get rid of alternative media.
Oh yeah, totally demonising.
And I'm not saying that alternative media is brilliant and all the other stuff. What it does mean is it means that the viewer needs to be discerning. They need to inject a bit of their own common sense intelligence to decide what they think.
Yeah, because COINTELPRO are really doing a piece on it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's... And people need to get more involved in terms of what's going on. I mean, the internet thing has, in terms of, as far as the malignant parasites are concerned, their greed kind of got in the way of it. But I'm sure there must have been a few guys in the malignant parasite thing that said, there's a downside to this internet thing. There really is a downside. And no, it's too good. We've got the banking thing. We've got blah, blah, blah. It says we can get our agenda and these guys are going, but there could be a few people out there. They're going to find out stuff that they wouldn't have normally been able to do from their local public library, honestly.
Yeah.
And if they've got the ability to connect and get together, that could really, make our glue not as adhesive as we'd like it to be. Things could start coming unstuck.
Yeah. And
when things start coming unstuck, they can get more transparent, as we've seen. I mean, I'm amazed, really, with this, just the paedophile thing, you see, because people don't see how that paedophile thing works. You get people like Edward Heath, who the police have recently, 25 years after the date, I mean, come on, really, they say, yeah, he was definitely a paedophile. Well, why didn't you tell us that 25 years ago? You must have known then.
Yeah, because there are a lot of, high-level masons in the police force that are paedophiles that are roped into it.
So what that says to me is there's rampant malfeasance and malpractice of public office going on here. Yeah. Why aren't these guys going to prison for 25 years? At least, they failed miserably, then they've got their pension. And all
this is why there has to be huge forgiveness, because a lot of the people who, may have been taken to a party, when they reach a certain level, taken to a party, put in a compromising situation with a child or an animal, and then blackmailed into then doing as they're told and towing the line, like these idiots from Bullingdon Boys Club, Etonian twats that we have running our government. They're just compromised idiots, and we have to forgive the compromised idiots, because so many people are like blaming. It's so easy to blame David Cameron and Theresa May, as I call them, because they're at the forefront. They're puppets at the forefront of our media and our world. Yeah, but they're nothing to do. They have no control, really. No. They do as they're frickin' told.
Exactly, which is why we have to get behind what's going on, which is the shareholders. You have to follow the money.
Yeah.
That's the thing, really. And also the administration, which is the legal system.
Well, the main families have been exposed a million times as far as a lot of the main connections. And it still doesn't seem to be enough. We need to do more we need to find out more about their connections, and really, like Serco and G4S and the whole benefits fraud system. Because people are still arguing over Mrs. Jones, who lives next door, who may have 2 extra kids and get more benefit than...
That's the same that happened in the Bolshevik revolution. You get these petty, small-minded people that in any intelligent society, they would be shamed and ridiculed in public. You know, in the same way that as a parent, if you had you've got 3 or 4 children, one starts telling tales on the other, you kind of ridicule them, say, stop telling tales on your sister, that's not the way you do it. But of course, the real parasites are the ones that live in, that house not too far from St James's. That have just got benefits of £780 odd million to redecorate. That third law, only take what you need and leave the rest. And, I could speculate a policy in terms of a transitional situation, in that you'd have what's called wealth capping. You say, okay, the maximum wealth anybody can have is, say, 11 million. 10 million. Why would any individual need more than that? That should be enough. And if somebody needs more than that, then they need to put a claim in for that. And they need to explain themselves in the same way that people do in order to just get £100 a week out of benefit. It needs to be that intrusive to say, well, why do you need it up?
Okay, to wrap it up, Alan, because we'll be continuing anyway. We'll do another show on Thursday. To wrap it up, are your any last thoughts? I do remain positive that changes are happening, and but I don't see it's going to be an easy ride.
No, of course it's not going to be an easy ride. It's going to be the most difficult thing that humanity, the monsters and Homo sapiens collectively have faced in their entire history, because if we don't realise what's going on and take affirmative action in order to stop it, then we're going to be well and truly Donald Ducked. We may have already gone past the point of no return. So that is the situation. There's so much to gain, really, in doing this. If you can see or perceive a world where people are living in a lot more harmony than they are now, everyone has got plenty to eat, their own natural cultural identities are being preserved, they're not being kind of mixed up in the same way that I remember when I was at school, the beginning of the week we'd start off with a new pack of plasticine with all those lovely colours in it, and by the end of the week it was this purpley grey thing. I like the French being French and the Italians being Italians and everybody being the culture that they come from. I don't want that grey purpley colour, which is kind of where it's being forced by the malignant parasites at the moment. So I think that we need to really preserve our cultural identities and celebrate the differences. That is what they call difference and diversity. And that's coming out of the same mouths as people that are working for the malignant parasites. So I'm for difference and diversity and celebrating the difference in cultures and all the rest of it.
So am I.
Most of the conflicts have been caused by the malignant parasites. A great effort, because it takes a lot to orchestrate and manipulate a war together, and do all that corporate stuff. They've worked really hard to destroy, rape, pillage, and just ruin everything.
Well, sadly, a little bit of our edit was cut off. So I think in part 2, what we need to focus on is more solutions to get us there. Because, and maybe get people like Nick Colostrom in and a few other people as well. But for part 2, I think that's where we should focus our attention.
Okay.